Hi guys, welcome to another video of this ArcGIS Pro tutorial series. And today we are going to see how to georeference an image like this, which does not have any spatial reference properties, using ArcGIS Pro software. So there's going to be two parts to this video. In the first part, we are going to see how to georeference this image using some of the coordinate information given on the map. Now, if you're lucky, the image that you're trying to georeference might contain some sort of coordinate reference properties stated on it, most likely along the border of the map, as you can see right here. And we would be able to make use of these coordinate information to sort of align this plain image on a map with correct spatial properties. And in the second part of the video, I will show you how to do the same georeferencing process, but assuming that we no longer have this coordinate information stated on the map. Because as we know, unfortunately, not all the maps out there contain these coordinate information stated on them, and in such a case, we might have to be a bit more creative and we'll have to find out another way to get the georeferencing done, and that's exactly what we are going to discuss in the second part of the tutorial. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in and get started with the tutorial. So if I were to show you guys what sort of an image I'm using for this purpose, I have this JPEG called NC Wilmington. So this would be the image that I'm actually trying to georeference. And if I go ahead and double click on this image, you can see that it's basically somewhere around Wilmington in North Carolina. And we can see the Brunswick River over here. And at the same time, we can also see the Cape Fear River over here. So with the stuff that's going on in this map, you might be able to get a general idea of where this map should belong to. However, by going through this georeferencing process, our objective would be to sort of fit this map exactly to the correct spatial coordinates in such a way that if you were to just drag this image and drop it onto a GIS program, it'll get placed exactly where it's supposed to be from a spatial perspective. And if I head back to the original image again, you can see that this is just a JPEG file by itself. It does not have any coordinate reference properties. So if I were to just drag this and drop it onto my ArcGIS Pro workspace, it'll not really know where to fit into on this base map. However, that's going to be our starting point. What we're going to do is we're actually going to just drag this and drop it into our workspace. And when you do that, you will get this sort of a window saying that this raster data source does not have statistics. Statistics allow for a better display. So of course, I'm just going to click over here and say yes. And at the same time, you will see on the top right corner that the coordinate system is unknown. As I showed you guys before, it's just a JPEG by itself. It doesn't really have any spatial reference properties. So it's pretty normal that we would get this sort of a warning sign. And if I head back to my original JPEG, since I know that this map shows us a specific region somewhere in Wilmington, North Carolina, what I can do is, just as a starting point, I could pan my base map just like this and probably try to zoom into Wilmington in this manner. So from this base map, I can already see that we have the Brunswick River right over here, and somewhere down here we have the Cape Fear River as well. So essentially what we're trying to do is we're essentially trying to get this JPEG image, and we're trying to sort of align this properly with this base map. And once you achieve that, you can sort of go ahead and save your work and assign those spatial reference properties as the spatial reference properties of this JPEG image as well. And as I told you guys in the first part of this tutorial, I will be doing that by making use of some of these coordinate information that's stated on the map itself. So if I were to maybe zoom into the borders of the map, you can see that we actually do see some latitude, longitude information over here as well. And at the same time, I can see that they also have stated some UTM coordinate information. So it's quite important to know exactly, or to decide before you start with the georeferencing process, what sort of a coordinate reference system that you're actually going to go with. Now, in this case, when I see this coordinate information, I do see the possibility of going with either WGS 1984 geographic coordinate reference system, or I could actually use one of these UTM coordinate reference systems as well. And for this case, if I were to go with this UTM coordinate reference system, then it would be quite important to know which UTM zone we're supposed to use, as well as the specific datum that we're supposed to use. So if I scroll down right to the bottom, fortunately this map states exactly that. Right over here you can see that the 1000-meter grids are using Universal Transverse Mercator Zone 18, and it's using the North American datum of 1983, NAD 83, which is a very commonly used datum across the United States. And since we have this information, what I'm going to do is, as the very first step, is to sort of change the coordinate reference system of my overall map to be the same datum that I'm actually going to work in. So to do that, what you can do is you can right click over here on map and go to properties. And if you head over to coordinate systems, right now you can see that it's using by default WGS 1984 Web Mercator coordinate reference system. And what I can do is I can just expand this projected coordinate system panel and expand UTM, and from here we can find NAD 1983, and all I have to do is just select the corresponding NAD 1983 UTM zone, which is UTM zone 18, and click OK. So when I do that, you can even see that the map itself gets sort of stretched out to match the things properly to that specific coordinate reference system. And the next thing that you can do is to sort of bring in this image that you imported into the vicinity of our working extent, just to make things easier. Because even though I did drag and drop this map into our ArcGIS Pro workspace, I currently have no idea where exactly this map is spatially. So what I can do is I can select this map and go to imagery, and there's this button called Georeference, and when you click on this, you will see that a whole new ribbon gets opened up, and from here, if you click fit to display, you will see that that map from wherever it was before would sort of adjust itself and will get centered somewhere around our current extent. Now if I were to move my extent and if I were to just click fit to display again, you can see that the map will move again from wherever it was before to the center of my working extent. Alright, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of this coordinate reference information that I actually stated on the map. And I can do that now very confidently because I have already ensured that my map is in the correct coordinate reference system. If I head back to properties again, you would see over here the coordinate reference system now is NAD 1983 UTM zone 18 north. And if you wanted to change the display units, instead of using decimal degrees, I think it would be appropriate to use meters since we are using a projected coordinate reference system. So click OK. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a couple of points where these easting and northing grid lines cross each other. For example, I think that this crossing point right here would be a good candidate for that, because if I were to kind of pinpoint to this exact point, I would be able to tell the software that this point in a system which uses NAD 1983 UTM zone 18 coordinate reference system should have an X coordinate of this value and a Y coordinate of this value. So that's exactly what we are going to do, and to do that we need to add control points. So let's head over to this button right over here, and you can see that the cursor sort of changes, and what you can do is you can just add a point at the crossing location, and then it'll start asking a target point. But since we don't have a target point right now, what we can do is we can just simply right click, and it'll actually give us the opportunity to enter the correct X and Y coordinates corresponding to this point. Now if you're not using a UTM system, you also can show coordinates in degrees, minutes and seconds by basically clicking right over here. But in my case, since I'm using UTM coordinates, I can just go ahead and enter the correct values. So the values corresponding to this particular crossing point, the X value should be 224,000, as you can see from here, and the Y value should be 37,93,000. Alright, click OK, and you can see that the map immediately vanished from the extent of our display. If I were to zoom out just a little bit, you would be able to see that this point now has moved to the correct XY coordinates that I specified. However, you can see that still there's actually a lot more to be done, because the extent of this image nowhere near fits the correct proportions and the scales of the underlying base map, which tells us that just doing this process for one point is actually not going to be enough. We need to add multiple points. The higher the number of points that you can reference, the higher the degree of accuracy you can expect from your georeferencing exercise. So since I picked a point somewhere over here as my starting point, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that my points are evenly spread out throughout the map canvas. So let's pick a point somewhere from here. And if I were to go with this point right over here, you can see the x coordinate of this map. If I were to right click, the x coordinate should be 234,000 meters, and the y coordinate correspondingly should be 3780,000, and let's fix that point as well. And sure enough, you can see that the map actually got rescaled, and roughly you can see that things are actually starting to align properly. However, just having 2 control points, it's actually not going to be enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a couple more points. Maybe let's pick a point from this corner as well, which is going to be 225,000, and the corresponding y value should be 3781,000. And let's add maybe another point somewhere from here, just to make sure that we have 4 points evenly spread out throughout the map canvas. Let's go with this point. Alright, I think for the first part of this demonstration, we can go ahead with 4 points. And as you can see, now the image is pretty much where it's supposed to be. Well, of course, you can do some secondary checks by, well, deactivating this map, just like this, just so that you would be able to see the stuff behind that. And I do see that it's actually a pretty good fit. And if you would like to sort of play with the transparency of this map, you can do that as well by selecting this image. And if you were to go to this raster layer, you would see one option to change the transparency. So if I were to just play with this slide bar, you can see that as I increase the transparency, you start seeing the base map underneath it. If I want to be a bit more specific, what I can do is I can actually zoom into a designated area and play with the transparency settings like this to see how well the georeferencing has been done based on the control points that we provided. And finally, just to get a summary of the control points, what you can do is you can again head over to this georeference ribbon, and from here, if you were to open this control point table, you will see the XY coordinates of the initial source points and the new XY coordinates to which we moved the map into. And right over here, you can see the residual of the XY. And basically what this residual says is the distance difference between the point where we indicated a specific crossing point is supposed to be and the point where the software thinks where that point should exactly be located at. And on the grand scheme of things, you can see compared to the spatial extent of the map, these residual values are actually negligible. You might be able to improve this probably by adding more points, and there's actually another way of improving this by fitting this map to a different type of a transformation. Because by default, what we're using is the first order polynomial transformation, which requires at least 3 points. However, if you have multiple points, you might be able to play around with the second order polynomial and the third order polynomial transformations, which will kind of rescale and warp this map around to make sure that this map properly fits to the points that you assign to it during the georeferencing process. But for the first example, I'm just going to stick with this first order polynomial. I'm not going to add more than 4 control points. And once you feel that you are generally happy with the results, what you can do is you can basically save your work, and what that's going to do is it's going to update the georeferencing transformation of the source raster dataset. And let's click on save. And now if I were to head back to the original folder, you can see that we have these 2 files that were created as a result of this georeferencing process. So if you were to move this map, just make sure that you actually move this entire thing around if you wanted to, let's say, pass this map to somebody else, making sure that you retain this geospatial information. Now, how to test that? The easiest way to test that would be to get rid of this map first. And let's say if I were to just drag this map and drop it over here, you can see that immediately now it recognized the correct spatial properties of each of the pixel of this raster, and it got basically placed where it's supposed to be spatially. We can test it out again, maybe by zooming into some specific location, and if I were to play with the transparency of the map, you would be able to see that the extent of the map pretty much matches the extent of the stuff on the base map. Alright, so guys, that's the way to georeference an image which has some coordinate reference properties stated on them. In the second example, we are going to see how to do the exact same process, however, without making use of this coordinate reference information. Alright, so to demonstrate the second example, you can see that I have created a new map called NC Wilmington 2. And if I were to open up this map, you can see that I have pretty much taken out all the coordinate reference information. So this is basically a plain JPEG image which has no coordinate reference information stated on it. And using this second method of georeferencing, we are trying to achieve the same result that we achieved during the first step, however by being a bit more creative when it comes to how we would actually match the common features between this JPEG image and the base map that we are using. So similar to the previous case, in order to import this NC Wilmington 2 JPEG image, all I have to do is just drag it and drop it over here, and I would calculate the raster statistics. And as you can see, because the second JPEG does not contain any coordinate reference information, you're going to get this warning again, which is totally fine as long as you understand what it exactly means. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this map and head back to imagery and open up that special georeference ribbon again, and I'm going to fit this map to the extent of the display. Well, if I were to move this a bit towards the right side, I think that would be much better. Yeah, so that you can see especially this point right over here where the two rivers meet. And this time the way that I'm going to sort of move and shrink this map around will still be by adding control points, but I'll be making use of some common features that I can find from both the JPEG image as well as the base map that I'm using in order to make my georeferencing process easier. And in doing so, I would also like to change my base map a bit, because you can see that by default I do have this world topographic map as my base map. However, I'm going to get rid of this map. And if I were to head over to map, I would be able to actually select a number of base maps from here. And to start off, I'm actually going to go with an OpenStreetMap, but if you wish to go with another map, that's actually totally up to you. But let's see how an OpenStreetMap would fit into what I'm trying to achieve. So you can see that now instead of the world topographic map, we have an OpenStreetMap over here. And let's head back to this georeference ribbon, and from here we can select add control points. And the objective right now would be to select common features from both maps and try to sort of specify a from point and a to point. What do I mean by that? For example, let's say if I want to move this point from wherever it happens to be spatially to the correct location, which is supposed to be this. Instead of right clicking, I'm just going to left click again over here because I would like to move my map to this point. And you can see that immediately that control point is registered right now. And as I mentioned to you guys, just one control point is actually not going to be enough. We're going to need to find multiple control points. Now these could be maybe unique landscape features, maybe points where major roads are crossing. For example, if I were to go with this crossing right over here, and if I could locate it back from the base map, well, I wouldn't really be able to see anything because my JPEG image is basically covering the extent of my base map. So what I can do is I can temporarily turn this JPEG image off and try to see whether I can find that same exact crossing point just like this, and fix your second target point to be this crossing right over here. And now if I reactivate the map, you would see that the map actually automatically got scaled down, and we do have signs of achieving a good georeferencing as we keep on adding more points. So let's go with maybe this sharp edge right over here as another source point, and I will deactivate the JPEG again, and you can see that it's almost there. All I have to do is just move it slightly like this, and if I activate, you can see that the map is now getting sort of shrinked and moved around accordingly to fit the georeferencing that we're trying to achieve. And as the fourth point, I'm going to maybe use another crossing that I can easily locate from here as the source point, and try to find that crossing on your base map and add another target point just like this. So you can see that I have added 4 control points. I'm going to go maybe up to 6 or 7 control points for this case. So let's try to find something from here just so that we have our control points evenly spread out all across the map. And let's try to get this midpoint of the location where all of these multiple roads are actually crossing each other. And let's try to see whether I can locate that exact point on the OpenStreetMap base map. Yeah, it should be somewhere over there. And that's going to be my 5th point. Let's try to find 2 more points, maybe one from here. I would be able to find the point where this crosses the river, which should be somewhere over here. And I think that point should be located on our base map somewhere over here. And let's add one more point, ensuring that we have all our points evenly spread out. I think I could go with this crossing point as well. Which almost happens to be the same exact spot. Alright, so as you can see, we did insert 7 control points, kind of evenly spread out all across the map. And now if I open up this control point table, you will see my source X, source Y, map X, map Y, as well as these residual values. And as I told you guys, by default, it's using a first order polynomial transformation. However, now since you have more than 6 control points, you also have the opportunity to test out how a second order polynomial transformation would actually look. So when I click over here, just pay attention to how the residual X and Y values would change. Yeah, you can see actually quite a big difference, especially in the residual X. So if I were to switch this back to the first order polynomial transformation, you can see these residual values tend to be slightly higher. However, if I select second order polynomial, you can see that the residual values tend to be much lower. And if you did notice, the image itself sort of stretched and adjusted accordingly to ensure that these residuals are actually kept at a lower value relatively. And once you're happy with the georeferencing, all you have to do is again go ahead and click save, which will result in these 2 additional files. And now if I want to test this out, just to see whether the georeferencing worked properly or not, all I can do is just remove this map and try to bring this back in. And as you can see, it basically gets placed exactly where it's supposed to be. You can do a bit of testing around by zooming into maybe one specific area, and you can activate and deactivate the map to see the differences. And as I showed you guys before, you can also play around with the transparency of the map as well. If you were to head back to raster layer and increase the transparency just a little bit until you start seeing the underlying base map, you can see that we are pretty much there in terms of our georeferencing. Alright guys, so that concludes the tutorial. I hope the 2 steps were clear for you guys. However, if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to add a comment down below and we can have a helpful discussion in the comment section if you do have any queries regarding the process that I explained to you guys today. And with that, I'm going to conclude this tutorial. Thanks a lot for watching. If you do like this tutorial, show your support by hitting that thumbs up button. And if you would like to stay tuned for this kind of interesting GIS related tutorials, you can definitely consider subscribing to this channel as well. I'll see you guys again with another tutorial soon.